Hello and welcome back to the Natural Wellness Tips Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Jennifer Shaw. Super excited to be here with you guys for yet another podcast. And today I have an incredible guest, someone I've been getting to know through business for the last almost a year and a half, really almost 2 years. Justin Atherton, he's an incredible man. We're going to dive all into all things mental toughness, courage, emotional fortitude. It's going to be a great conversation. But before we dive into that, I want to thank you guys for coming to the podcast. If we haven't connected on Instagram, head on over, Natural Wellness Tips, say hello, drop me a DM. I love to hear from you guys. And wherever you're listening, YouTube, podcast, or iTunes, Spotify, wherever it is you're tuning in, make sure you subscribe so you get notified every single week when I drop a new episode. You don't want to miss the guests and podcast conversations I have coming up for you. So let me introduce you to Justin. Justin is an incredible man. He was working for years with the SWAT team. And after departing the SWAT team, he launched Confidence Unchained. It's a company that teaches those leadership skills I was mentioning, the principles that really help make men from any walk of life achieve their goals, get to the life they desire, and do it in all areas, right? It's not just about business. It's not just about health. It's about relationships. It's about everything. So he works with business owners, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and Justin has helped men across a broad range of industries build their own peak performance and regain their edge. So, I know some of you guys are listening and you're like, well, you always talk about women and our health and wellness. And one of the things I've learned over the last year, really, as I've dove deeper into a healthy relationship with my partner, Owen, is it's not just me. If I'm healthy and he's not, then we're not healthy. And that's what I experienced in my first marriage. And that's one of the conversations I really want to have with you, Justin, is this partnership of we have to have healthy men and healthy women in a relationship to make it work. We both have to be healthy in ourselves to be healthy with the coupling of us as a duo, right? And if you're women that love women, that's wonderful. You both have to be healthy. Men that love men, you both have to be healthy, right? The idea here is the partnership has to be healthy in itself and then together. And that's where I want to kind of dive in with you, Justin. But before we do that, will you say hello to the audience and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for having me on here. I'm excited to share with your audience. A little bit about me. I'm a father of a 9-year-old girl. She's my world. And like you said, I'm a men's coach. My background is in law enforcement. I use a lot of the law enforcement tools as self-development tools to help men out there. And I like how you pointed it out there because you work with women, and I work with men. But these tools are universal. It's just who we connect with, how we share that. So everything we're going to talk about today, it doesn't matter, what your gender is, what your relationship combo is. It's all universal. It all applies to all of us. So I'm excited to be on the show, Jennifer.
It's my pleasure to have you. Absolutely. And like you said, it applies in all directions, and healthy is healthy. And we have to understand how different people think. We have to understand how different people deal with situations. So women can be really controlled by fear, and fear can stop us in our tracks. And many of the times men can be propelled by fear, and they're like, this is scary, I want to keep going, right? And it's different for everyone, right? But it's this idea of like, we all have to understand how we show up different. We have to be willing to ask those questions and have those hard conversations. And I am super excited to have that with you today. So I want to really touch on this idea of like, you had a successful career. You were in SWAT, you're in law enforcement. What prompted you to say, I want to go out and make a difference? I want to go out and help men show up the best they can for their partners, because that's something you really talk about. It's not just about being your best self for yourself. Like, you really highlight and show your family and your lifestyle, and you show that you want to help men be the best they can for all of those people in their lives. So what bridged that for you?
Well, I think you talk to any successful coaches out there, and our perfect client is ourselves, like 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I I wish I had all of this insight, years ago, all of these tools and techniques and understanding of emotions and health and mental toughness. I wish I had all this years ago. And so now that I have this information and have this knowledge, I'm like, I have to share it with everyone because it's almost like I feel a duty to share this. And in my career, a passion of mine was training, training newer officers, being a supervisor and training the people around me. And so even though I get that question, like, how do you go from law enforcement to being a coach? That doesn't seem like it fits. For me, it was an easy transition because the training was a passion and realizing, like you said, all of these skills transfer into every aspect. I mean, it's not just business life, it's personal life. Every interaction that we have, these soft skills really apply.
How we do one thing is how we do everything, right?
Exactly.
And I always focus on those three areas: health, wealth, relationships. They can be broken down into smaller areas from there. But the bottom line is if you're not healthy in one of those areas, it's the weak leg. It's
Yeah.
gonna bring down the wheelbarrow, right? Like you've got to have all three and you have to have focus in them. So this idea of mental toughness, of emotional fortitude, kind of when you look at a man who's coming to you, and maybe women can relate to this as far as their husbands, like you have somebody in your life that's like struggling, they want to do better but they seem to always sabotage themselves. They maybe surround themselves with the wrong people, they're not clear on what they want in their lives and goals. Like what does that mean to you when someone comes to you with that feeling of just almost lost?
So it's an interesting idea because one of the big things I talk about is emotional fortitude and emotional intelligence. And there's a tool that I share a lot called the emotional matrix. Not one man has come to me to work on his emotional fortitude, but they all need it. They're all lacking in that area. And so for me, it's not a selling point, right? It's not something sexy that men go, oh yeah, I want to work with Justin because he talks about emotional intelligence. That's not that's not how it works. Most of the men come to me as far as, wanting to be a better leader in their business, work on their communication skills, and it's normally business related.
Mhm.
What ends up happening is once we start working on these tools and techniques, they come back and they tell me how their home life has improved, their conversations with their spouse and their kids are like, I never knew that this was an issue, but now I'm able to be a better father and be a better husband. And that's the most rewarding part for me, because as a coach we can see these things,
Mhm.
that it's like, hey, this is the issue. But until the person realizes it for themselves, it's hard to bring to the surface. So
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
an interesting aspect how it gets brought up.
That makes a lot of sense. And I run into that with even my clients when they're coming to me for, wanting to get healthy, wanting to lose weight, or wanting to just live a healthier, happier life. And I'm like, okay, we need to work on mindset. They're like, my mindset's fine. I'm like,
No, no.
okay. 'Cause if you tell me your mindset's fine, I know that your mindset is in the gutter, and we have a lot more work to help you
Yeah.
recognize that your mindset's not fine before we can even get there. Because I can tell you, I do mindset work every day. My mindset is not fine. It is not. It
Yeah.
is something I work on. I have affirmation cards all over my house. I
Yeah.
have, reminders in my phone. My mindset is something I work on every single day. So I love that. Have you happened to heard of Sean? Oh, no, Sean Whalen from Lions Not Sheep. He wrote Get Shit Done.
Yes. Yeah. I'm a fan of his. So yeah, I like a lot of his content.
I just started reading his book last night. It's a simple read. And one of the things that he explains in that beginning of the book is I, on the outside, had all the success, but my marriage was horrible. My kids didn't have time with me, whether they had time with me or not. I wasn't there. Like he was like, I was a wrecking ball in my own life. And,
Mhm.
and I think that kind of points to what you're saying is like, we have to really look within and change here before we can make a big difference in our world. So if people are listening out there and they're like, okay, yeah, I guess, mindset, whatever, I need to maybe talk about it, but I'm not quite there yet. What are some of the areas that we can make shifts in to start to bring more awareness to those areas of, I don't want to say weakness, areas of potential growth?
Mhm. Yeah, it comes back to the idea of a lack of integrity is contagious.
Mm.
Because if it's one aspect of your life, and you mentioned it before, if one aspect of your life is out of alignment, it bleeds over into the other areas. And I really believe the main goal is to have a higher self-awareness in the decisions that you make, in the actions that you take, in the thoughts that are passing through your head. Because I find that a lot of people act on these fleeting thoughts that just pass through our head, and there's so many different thoughts and ideas that come across, and it's like, oh, this one sounds good, let me just use that one because it was the first one that came up. No, it's about a level of self-awareness to go, do I want to act on this? Where did this even come from? Is that true? And being curious about these thoughts that come across our mind, and seeing how we end up distracting ourselves from what our real goals are.
Yeah.
One of the big things that I push onto my clients is this idea of these sabotage words that we use. It's based in content analysis, which is it's a law enforcement tool on how you determine the truthfulness of written and spoken word.
Oh.
But what I found is that if you focus it on yourself, you can find that you're lying to yourself quite often in the goals that you want to achieve. The most prevalent form of these words are stop action verbs. So
Okay.
trying, wanted, plan to, wanted, love to, mean to. And
Mm.
all of those have an underlying level of uncertainty. And I love it when people come back at me and go, well, it's just part of our language when I say I'm going to try to do something or plan to do something or I want to do something. And I'm like, okay, I dare you to walk up to your spouse and say, I'll try to be faithful to you.
Yeah, see how that'll go.
Yeah. Or I want to be faithful. I'll
Mhm.
plan to be faithful.
It's my, I'm
None
hoping
of that.
that works out.
Yeah, none of that is going to work, right? You want to hear, I will be faithful. I am going to be
Yeah.
faithful. And we expect that level of certainty from that statement. But why don't we expect that from ourselves? Instead of saying, I'll plan to go to the gym today. I want to eat better. No, I will eat better. I am going to the gym today. It completely changes your mindset and changes your actions that you take behind it.
I just got such chills. I'm not even lying, like all over. Yes. I don't even know what else to say to you to that, but yes, like that is absolutely true. And why do we treat ourselves so differently than the level of respect we give other people? Right. And I always kind of say that voice in your head is like, if is what you're saying right now something you would actually say to your best? Would you call your best friend and be like, you are a lazy piece of shit, get your life together? Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes I would say that to my best friend when she needs to hear it, but she doesn't often need to hear it. But you know what I mean? Like, are we saying those things to our best friend, or are we when our best friend calls us and says, that she's struggling with something, or he's struggling with losing weight, are we going to sit there and badger them, or are we going to say, listen, what are you going to make happen this week to hit that goal? We're
Yeah.
going to cheer them on. We're going to help them create action steps. We're going to be there to hold them while they're upset, but we're also going to be there to push them to reach their goals. So yes, we need to change that. That is such a powerful way of thinking of those verbs and how we use them within our mind. And even when we like write our goals, I have a good friend of mine who will, it's probably like every 5 minutes in a conversation, she's like, you need to reframe that. And I'm like, I get off the phone with her and I have like 10 notes of like things I need to reframe. And I'm like, okay, but I love it because it helps call me out on those little words and those little hold up points. And we can't have that, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely important to catch ourselves in those. So, we tend to think of those more those more concrete areas of like fitness or income and things, right? And that's what really draws us into those coaching relationships or personal work. It's like you hire a coach because you want to make more money. You hire a coach because you want to get in shape. Like not many people hire a coach, like you mentioned, to come and feel better emotionally or to have higher emotional intelligence. So what is some of the processing that you'll do, or what are some advice you have for people that are really struggling with the idea that what happens in here in the mind is actually going to play out like in the real world?
Sure. So, and men deal with this completely different, because normally if I get up in front of a group of men, because I still teach classes to law enforcement on interview skills and leadership skills, and a big part of that is emotional intelligence. And when I stand up in front of them and I'm like, hey guys, today we're going to talk about emotions, and normally the class is about 85 to 90% men, they look at me like I'm dumb. They're like, hey, you're in the wrong room, buddy. You need to go down the hallway. We don't talk about emotions in here. So there's an extra obstacle in place for men based on how, society talks about emotions. But when you get down to the science of it, the science of your brain and how it works, I I think back to my idea of emotions, 10, 15 years ago, and how I was like, I don't let any emotion slip out. Like, if I ever did, I felt weak or that I messed up. I'm like, oh, I felt sadness. I'm like, dang it. I let that one slip out because I didn't understand how emotions worked. I thought you could just keep a lid on it. Now I look back and laugh at myself. I'm like, that was ridiculous, because there's so much science behind the emotions that we feel, because it's a physiological sensation that you feel in your body, and it's involuntary based on the context of your environment and what you're dealing with. And so when you start explaining the science behind emotions, like hey guys, it's not your fault, you're not weak, you're not broken for feeling emotions. This is something that it's ingrained into us for emotions to get triggered, and they last a very short period of time. But then also understanding the difference between emotions and feelings. Emotions are those involuntary responses to our environment. The feelings are our thoughts about our emotions. And so separating those, distinguishing between those. But I think the big idea, at least for men, is talking about the science behind the emotions and how it's okay to have them, giving them that permission to go, hey guys, it's okay to be sad and afraid and worried and anxious and irritated. Those are okay. It's just how you deal with them after you experience that.
And then when we don't deal with them, we oftentimes turn to alcohol, avoidance, eat drugs, unhealthy behaviors. Like that tends to be what we do when we don't process that. And I like how you break down the emotions and feelings. They are two separate things. I've always had a lot of masculine energy and just leaned in that direction, almost as a protective thing for myself throughout life. And I always say I didn't learn to cry until I was 33 going through a divorce. And then I was like, what's this crying thing? And why do I not stop doing it? And then I realized, like you said, it's like, I didn't avoid feeling those emotions or, working through them. Like they were piled up years upon years upon years in my body. And I had to then work through them because I didn't for so long. And I'll tell you, one of the most attractive things about my partner is he does cry. He does express his feelings. He does share what comes up for him. And he does tell me when he's having a hard time or when things make him very excited. And that I think that we need to normalize it across all of society, that it is normal to have emotional responses. It is normal to have feelings. And if we actually pay attention to them, we can have healthy coping mechanisms, such as sitting down with your spouse and having an open conversation, right?
I think a big thing is we label emotions as good or bad. And I don't believe that emotions are good or bad. Are they useful or not based on the context of the situation?
Yeah.
Because fear and anger could be useful if you're getting mugged on the side of the road to be able to fight off your attacker. But then happiness, at a funeral, if you're laughing in the back row, that's not useful either. So we have this ingrained into us that there's good emotions and bad emotions. And it's are they useful or not based on the context of the situation?
Super powerful. Yeah. Cause like you said, happy can be a bad, inappropriate emotion.
Sure.
And happy can also be an appropriate emotion depending on that situation. And it's just knowing to express them. My niece, one of my favorite memories of her, just like when she was little, was she came up to me. I was helping raise her at this point, and she came up to me and she's like, "Auntie, I am frustrated." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Tell me more." And she explained to me why she was frustrated. And then I asked her what she was going to do about it. And she's like, "Well, I'm telling you about it." And I was like, "Okay, do you need anything from me?" And we had this conversation about like, this is the emotion. This is how it's making me feel. This is what I'm going to do about it. Like, this is the help I need. And if we can all like, honestly, like as adults, we don't know how to do that, right? So if we can teach ourselves how to handle emotions that way and have an open conversation with them in our mind as they come up, then we can have that emotional intelligence. We can begin to have that emotional fortitude. We can begin to use those emotions to power us, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so it's such a great conversation, and I think it's something that all people need to start having. I think it's something that all we need to have in all of our relationships. We need to have with our conversations about this with our family members, with our significant others, with our children. So much can be changed if we just normalize that emotions are an everyday part of life.
Mhm. Yeah, they're getting triggered in order to change something.
Mhm.
Use it as fuel rather than resisting the emotion. Because, like you said, if you, I like to talk about it as your emotional backpack. If you just start stuffing emotions in there and not letting them out, it could be weeks, months, years of emotions that you've packed in there, and then when they start coming out, it's very difficult to deal with all of those at once.
Mhm.
So it's more efficient to deal with them as you go in between different interactions. And that's something that I give to my clients, the emotional matrix. It helps them process things very quickly. It can be like a 5-minute process to process out that bad interview you just had, or talk, or something you're dealing with your spouse or at work. So it's it's definitely beneficial to process those out faster.
I love it. So tell me more about this emotional matrix.
So the emotional matrix is based off of the 7 universal emotions that we express in our face. And that's based off of Dr. Paul Ekman's work. And so the 7 emotions are happy, sad, fear, anger, surprise, disgust, and contempt.
Okay.
Now, regardless of where you are on the planet, we all express these emotions on our face the same. And you look at that list going to the idea of good and bad emotions. So happy's a good one. The rest of them sound bad, right? Anger, fear, disgust, contempt, surprise, maybe a neutral one, but it seems heavy on the negative emotions. Again, I stress that there's no such thing as good or bad. It's useful or not useful. But we experience all of these emotions in different intensity levels. We can just say high, medium, and low. So a high level anger could be agitated, a moderate level anger could be annoyed, and then a low level anger could just be bothered.
Mm.
So in every emotion we experience in different intensity levels. And going to the frustrated word, we tell our clients not to use frustrated or concerned,
Mhm.
because those can be a combination of different emotions and in different combinations based on the situation. And so get away, and this is a tip for everybody listening out there, get away from using frustrated or concerned, because you want to get laser focused when you pinpoint your emotions. Because
Mm.
frustrated could be, I'm irritated and sad, or
Yeah.
I'm angry and worried. You want to break it down to go, what specifically am I feeling? Like, I'm anxious. Okay, why am I anxious? What is triggering that? Why am I worried? Why am I agitated? So it's about being the sniper, and getting, very, pinpoint with the emotions that you're feeling. And what's interesting is that you could feel like 3 different shades of fear in
Mhm.
one incident. You could be terrified, panicked, worried, and anxious. All of those fall under the fear category, but each one of them is going to have a different reason for it to be triggered.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what I have my clients do is, you thinking about a specific incident, scanning over the card. And I wish I knew the science behind this aspect of it, because we have a card with all of these emotional words on there, and the words will just pop out at you, or you'll
Yeah.
pause on a word,
You'll
and
get
you're like,
it.
Yeah, one that stood out for me, which is funny. I was using it on myself. Irked, and I
Mhm.
stopped on that. And I'm like, I've never used irked in a sentence in my life, and I'm like, but it popped out at me, right? So I wrote it down on my list, and so we write down all the emotional words, and then you go back over it and go, okay, why am I agitated? Why am I irked? And just write a couple sentences out, and you'll notice that each one is slightly different,
Mm.
of what's triggering it. And sometimes when you write it out, you realize that, like, oh, that's silly. That's not
Yeah.
something that I can, affect or change. It's just something that I have to deal with. And so you're able to just process it out.
Yeah.
So, but it ends up being this like emotional release valve, because especially when you find the one that like is really weighing heavy on you, you almost have this, physiological response to it. You're like irritated. You're like, yeah, I'm irritated because of this. And it's like
Mhm.
this release valve that you get from identifying it so specifically. And because most of us don't have a very well versed emotional vocabulary. And what's funny is I read a study where they said women use about 190 emotional words. To men, it might be about 145.
Okay.
I think those are grossly overrated, because when we give clients a blank emotional matrix as a test, we're like,
Mhm.
so it's the 7 universal emotions, but everything else is blank, and we give them 5 minutes to fill out as many words as they can. How many words do you think they come up with, Jennifer?
Oh, I'm gonna say I maybe would get like 20.
That would be huge. Like, anybody getting more than 10 is like, hey, you're doing good. Like,
Okay.
normally what I see is like 5 to 7 words
Mm.
in a 5 minute period. Because
Five
we
minutes.
grab on to just a handful of words, frustrated, concerned, like these type of words that we just use over and over
Yeah.
again. So we don't have a very well-versed emotional vocabulary. So it's important to establish that, so you can release these emotions more efficiently and more effectively.
Wow. Yeah, and if we can put words to it, if we can have the conversation with ourselves, then we
Yeah.
can affect change because of that awareness and have conversations with those around us. And you can say, "Hey, I'm sorry that I was, acting like a jerk earlier. I realized I was frustrated about XYZ, or I was, not frustrated. See, that word's like stuck in my head. I was peeved. There we go. That's
Sure.
a fun one. I was peeved at XYZ. And I realize now that it had nothing to do with you and I have no control over it. And I'm, this is what I'm going to do about it,
Mhm.
and you can have that conversation instead of just like putting it in that backpack or shoving it
Yeah.
down. Right. So,
And then the higher levels of emotional intelligence is when you start helping other people identify their emotions and manage their emotions.
mm,
So I use it with my daughter. And what we can do is, when we're having a conversation with someone and we notice that they're in a certain emotional state, it's like, hey, well, you seem a little bothered about what's going on. We're giving them the words, and the way I phrase it is like, is you seem like, or it sounds like, you're giving them permission to correct you. Because if they
mhm,
correct you with a different emotional word, even better. It's like, well, I'm not bothered. I'm agitated because of this.
mhm.
So we always guess low. I would never use a high intensity word. If I was like, Jennifer, you seem irritated right now,
Yeah.
I would never do that. I'd guess low, be like, you seem a little bothered about,
Mhm.
the conversation. And it's either gonna, hit the nail on the head, and they're like, yeah, I'm bothered because of this, or they're like, no, I'm not bothered, I'm more, anxious that this is gonna happen. And it's like, great. So you're giving them their emotional vocabulary words and letting them process their emotions. Because how many times have you been in an argument with someone's agitating, you're like, calm down, and how many times did that work?
Well, zero. I don't use it anymore because I've learned that it doesn't work.
It doesn't. But the reason that it doesn't is because calm is not the emotion that they're feeling.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, you seem really agitated. Like, tell me what's going on.
Hmm.
So it's better to identify it than to try to, project on them some other emotion that they're not.
Hmm. Oh, this is so powerful, so powerful. Yeah, I could talk about this stuff all day long because we have to bring awareness to emotions, and I think this emotional intelligence, this emotional awareness, is what does make an impact on every area of our life. When we control, we have an idea of kind of what thoughts are going through our head, and instead of trying to control and stop them, we work with them. We process them. We have awareness around them. We have conversations around them. Then we can make changes in all areas of our lives. Because as long as this is just spinning and the thoughts are going wild, we're not going to affect change, right? We're not going to move forward in our lives. And so powerful. I love the work that you do. I love the passion that you have behind it and the awareness that you bring to it. So I do want to keep going on this convo, but we're going to wrap it up for sake of the podcast. But I have my rapid fire questions for you. So let me ask you this. What's the number one health and wellness tip you have for our listeners?
First thing is drinking water. No one drinks enough water. I know you talk about it as well. I bet you drink enough water, but I've got mine over here, cheers. Very rarely do people drink enough water. So the first thing I do in the morning, brush my teeth, chug a glass of water that's sitting next to my bed. I think it's so important for your brain health, getting your body moving, thinning out your blood a little bit so everything's moving a little bit smoother. So I think that's number one. I know you talk about it. If I were to throw in another one, I use a lot of brain supplements, some nootropics. I know you and I talked about, I've got like 6 phone calls to get on today. So I was like, I need this today to keep my brain like running at full steam. So
yeah, you gotta fuel your body.
yes.
And how if we're not taking care of this vessel, how can we give, right? And it's so important. So let go of those excuses of I don't have time or it's hard or whatever you tell yourself, and just persist to make it happen. I love it. What is one healthy habit, mentally, physically, that you maybe struggle with? Everyone thinks we're kind of perfect because we teach this, but we're not. So what's something that you struggle with consistency around?
I would say getting up at the same time every day.
Ah.
It's tough for me. Like I used to be like a snooze alarm guy. I used to like hit my snooze alarm for like an hour until I, discovered the whole idea of sleep inertia, to where, you get this brain fog because you're confusing your brain. Are we awake? Are we going to sleep? What are we doing? Then you've got this 4-hour brain fog in the morning where you can't be productive because your brain is half asleep. And so there's times that I still revert to that, because there was years and decades of practice of hitting the snooze alarm. And so getting out of that, and I know how important it is, but there's certain days where I'm just like, just another 5 minutes, just another 5 minutes. So I do catch myself doing that sometimes. So
I love it.
that's one thing that I fall back on.
I think many people can relate there. Most people can't relate with me because I don't set an alarm. And when I like sleep in till 6:30, I'm like, whoa, sleeping in today. Like, and I only set alarms for flights and hikes. That's really it. I mean, other than that, I'm up and at 'em early. So I love it though. I think that's a good thing to talk on, is that what happens to us physiologically when we do snooze and confuse the brain. So what are you most excited about in life right now?
Man, there's so many things going on. I would say the thing I'm most excited about is oh man, my girlfriend's moving out here. So we've been doing a long distance relationship. So she's moving out here by the end of the year. So yeah, excited about that. So
That's huge. Congratulations on that. That's wonderful.
yeah, thank you.
It's if you can make it through long distance, the rest is going to be easy.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so now I have a selfish question.
Okay.
What is your all-time favorite book?
I don't know all-time favorite, but recent favorite that I've actually read twice is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's a hostage negotiator that worked for the FBI for a long time, and he talks about how every interaction we have can be a negotiation. So there's a lot of interesting ideas in there about having conversations with people and how you word certain things when you're asking for something, and always ending on a positive note. He uses the term tactical empathy. So it's a great book. I would definitely suggest that to everyone.
Oh, I'm 1000% reading it. I'm excited. I'm going to get that today. Have you, I have to ask you this question before we wrap up. Have you read The Gift of Fear? It's written by a police officer as well. He was an
It
investigator.
sounds familiar, but I don't think I have read it.
You would love it. And I think everyone, I talk about it a lot on here. It was something that was recommended to me by two different people when I was going through my divorce, and it really changed the way that I process the messages my body was telling me. And
Mm,
this gentleman was a private investigator, and he talks about how we can save our lives if we listen to that fear and we tune in. So I think it would just be a book that you'd be fascinated by. So I wanted
sure.
to bring that up. Okay, lastly, and probably most important, we have people that love what you shared. They want to know more. They're going to want to connect with you. They're going to want to connect their spouses with you. How do they find you?
Sure. The best way to get a hold of me is on my website, which is confidenceunchained.com. And same thing on Instagram. My tag name is Confidence Unchained. I'm also on LinkedIn with my name, Justin Atherton. So those are the best ways to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, this has been such a pleasure. I really enjoy having the conversation and normalizing it amongst men and women, and knowing that like how we talk to ourselves, how we process our emotions, how we show our feelings, how we express them is going to change every element of our life. So I can't thank you enough for joining me on the podcast, and I hope to have this conversation again soon. We'll dive deeper.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And we'll see you guys next week on the podcast. If you guys haven't, head over to Instagram and said hello. Make sure that you follow Justin at Confidence Unchained. Follow me at Natural Wellness Tips. Drop into the DM. Say hello to us. We love to hear from you guys. And if you guys are enjoying YouTube, head over to YouTube and subscribe. I'm dropping the videos of these podcasts every week on YouTube, so you can check them out. And until next week, namaste.